What's going on, people in YouTube land? Kimchi Chris here, and welcome to today's video. And let's just get this out of the way in the beginning. If you're a returning visitor or a subscriber or something along those lines, you probably have noticed immediately here that the background's a little bit different than normal. And that's because, I just wanted to try to shoot in front of something that wasn't just that black background I've used on every video. I think that's pretty cool and it has its place, but I want to try shooting some different stuff. And I figured this might be a decent place to start for a background. You got a guitar amp, you got a Gibson, you got records, you got Kiss, you got all kinds of stuff here. So with that out of the way, I'm sure you're not here for me to talk to you about my interior decoration skills for my YouTube channel here. You clicked on the title, you know what we're talking about. We're talking about one of the most, one of the most left or right Kiss records. You either love this thing or hate this thing for the most part. This record is one that some people think is the greatest thing the band's ever put out, and some people think it's the worst thing that the band has ever put out. That's right, today we are talking about Carnival of Souls. Now, I just want to get it out of the way first thing. This is not really going to be a review of the record by any stretch of the imagination. I'm going to save that for a series I have planned down the road where I'm going to be talking a lot about my opinions on the records and stuff. So if you're looking for a review, this isn't it. Go check somewhere else on YouTube. Almost Human 56, for example, has a really great review up that's definitely worth checking out. But this video is going to more concentrate on my relationship with this record and kind of the legacy it's left with me, because just like any other piece of art, this has kind of had some ups and downs with me as a fan. Now, I'll go ahead and get out of the way and let you know that I like this record. I don't think it's bad by any stretch of the imagination. I also don't think it's their greatest record of all time or anything like that, but it's definitely not bottom of the barrel. You know, it's no, it's no High in the Shade. It's no Peter Criss solo record. Oh, throwing those out there right now. So if you love those, you probably hate me a little bit more right now. But with that being said, I enjoyed this record. Now, in the beginning, it didn't really start out that way for me, but let me kind of paint a picture here for you. So I didn't get this record when it first came out. I actually somehow ended up with a bootleg early on of it, and this is what that bootleg looks like. Now, there were a lot of versions of the bootleg going out of this, and this one here you see just kind of has Gene and Paul on there, and it has a skull with some clown makeup. Same picture on the back, and then those kind of skeleton versions of the band, and this one's actually kind of a nice bootleg. It's on a silver-backed CD. It's not like a CD-R or anything like that. And it just has more pictures of that skeleton, and it actually doesn't have the full record on it. It has 9 songs on here. They're in a different order than they would end up being on the final product, and I know that 2 of the song titles are wrong, I believe, on here. Yeah, Master and Slave is labeled as Tell Me, and It Never Ends, or It Never Goes Away is listed as It Never Ends. So this was my first intro basically into Carnival of Souls, and funny enough, I might have ended up getting this bootleg after the actual album was already out. I didn't get the album right when it came out because I was a little guy. I was bite-sized when this record came out. So, you know, if for some reason you're watching this and don't know the history behind this record, let's just kind of go in a different direction for a second. This is the record that the Gene, Paul, Bruce, and Eric Singer lineup were working on as the follow-up for Revenge. And then the reunion tour came and this record got shelved. Basically, you know, legend has it that on one of the last days of recording this record, if not the last day, basically Gene and Paul came down to the studio and said, hey, Bruce and Eric, you guys have been great, but we're reuniting with Ace and Peter. We're gonna rule the world. We're gonna play stadiums again. We're tired of playing these mid-level places, and, you know, it sucks to be you guys, but you're out of the band. And in that situation, I can only imagine how much it had to hurt to be Bruce and Eric. Now, maybe not Eric so much. He was still fairly new to the band, and, you know, whatever. But with Bruce, he had been in the band for over a decade, but, you know, even in the middle of the recording of this, they did the unplugged thing, and, you know, the writing was on the wall, and, you know, the record got shelved, and it wasn't ever going to get released. But thanks to the bootlegs going around, and a lot of them had the title Head or Seduction of the Innocent, things like that, it eventually had to get released. The label was like, we gotta get this thing out there, and the band themselves even were tired of people hearing a subpar version of the record, so it got released, and it came out in the middle of all of the reunion explosions, basically. It came out in '97, and it came out, you know, with basically no promotion from the label or anything. Funny enough, the only single, or maybe not the only single, I think Master and Slave was also released as a single, but the main single, The Jungle, was actually a hit on radio. It was a top 10 modern rock hit at the time. Maybe because everyone's excited about the band, maybe because it was actually a good song, and it is a pretty rad song, but that being said, at least there was that made Bruce at the very least feel good, and he talks about that, you know, at least was a small victory as this record kind of got thrown out there. So that's the back story kind of on the record. So back to where I am. I ended up with this bootleg right here as a little guy. And I listened to it, and at that point, I don't know exactly where I was in my KISStory, so to speak, or where I was as a Kiss fan, but I know I was mostly into the makeup stuff. You know, my first recording I ever had from the band was Love Gun, and then I got Destroyer and Alive, and it kind of went in logical order from there. But somewhere along the line, I ended up with this bootleg, and I knew it was rare. I'd never seen it, and I remember getting it at a CD warehouse and actually begging my parents to purchase it for me, and I think it was like, at the time, $7.99 or something like that. It was pretty cheap, and I thought it was a completely unreleased recording. Like I said, this might have been even after the fact that Carnival Souls had come out, but I thought it was a completely new recording, so I got it and I listened to it, and I honestly was kind of disappointed. It didn't sound that great quality-wise. At that time, I was only into classic rock music, basically Kiss, Aerosmith, Alice Cooper, Cheap Trick, things like that. So it was a little bit heavy for me at the time of being like a little guy, I don't know, 8 years old, something like that. And, you know, I didn't love it. I hated grunge music as well. You know, that's kind of the two things it's always compared to, is either metal or grunge. And I wasn't feeling the thing. So even though I wasn't really feeling the record, I kind of just took it and I filed it into the shelf. I filed it onto the shelf. There it was. It stayed. I wasn't a huge fan of it, and that's where it was. Fast forward, when I had seen the record itself several times in the record stores and things like that, and honestly, I didn't even know it was the same record that I had on bootleg. I thought it was a separate recording with, the non-makeup lineup. And, I eventually ended up getting this copy right here. I've had it all this time. And I got it out of a bargain bin. I remember that. I actually got it out of a bargain bin the same day that I got this thing right here, this bad boy, that I think was in the bargain bin of the used store because it wasn't the remastered one. You know, those remastered CDs were kind of all over the place during that time. This was the kind of original pressing. So I got these two records at the same time as a younger kid that was a really big fan of the makeup era of the band. Which one do you think that I really levitated to more? You know, it was this one. So I listened to this and I kind of was a little bit thrown off because I could tell immediately it was the same songs that were on my bootleg, but I still wasn't really feeling them. So this kind of, some of the others just got shelved. And I listened to this thing a lot. And I mean, how can you not love Rock and Roll Over if you're getting into the makeup era of the band? I mean, you got Calling Dr. Love, you got Mr. Speed, you got Hard Luck Woman, got Love 'Em and Leave 'Em. Man, this record blew me away. So this thing just sat on the shelf. But over time, my music taste changed because when you're, pint size, when you can be held in a hand and then you grow to this thing that can't be held in a hand unless it's the Hulk's hand or something like that, your music taste changed. And I got into metal. I started to get into metal. I started to get into bands like, I know Megadeth was one of my first early metal releases that I actually owned. I got a Misfits record from the Michael Graves era, and I thought that was a metal record for some reason. Now, mind you, there's a lot more metal influence on that era of the band, but for some reason I thought that was a metal record. And, I got that. I got an Anthrax Greatest Hits CD, things like that. And along the way, for some reason, I decided to revisit this thing that I never really looked into. And I started to enjoy it out of the blue. I don't know why. I don't know how. For some reason, I started to enjoy it. Now, looking back, the reason I probably started to enjoy this record is because it was a lot more in tune with what I was liking at the time. When I put it on just kind of out of the blue and I heard Hate again, the opening track, I don't know how I didn't love this to start with. I mean, this is arguably Gene's heaviest song. Hate is an amazing, amazing song. I mean, it's a metal song. Now, Kiss obviously isn't a metal band, but I dare you to go listen to the track Hate and tell me that's not a metal song. It is definitely the heaviest Gene has ever been, and arguably the heaviest the band has ever been. So when I was listening to this, and then it was followed by Rain and Master and Slave and all these great songs, Seduction of the Innocent, I Walk Alone, I kind of wondered why I didn't like this the first time that I listened to it. But I got really into it all of a sudden out of the blue because at that point I was into the heavier stuff, and I never really left Kiss by any stretch of the imagination, but I wasn't listening to the records as much. But I started listening to this one a whole lot, and I kind of revisited Revenge at that point and really got into Revenge again, and I was really into that era of the band. I really loved the Bruce Kulick, Eric Singer era, and this record, it really fueled that. And I really got into it, and for a while this became one of my favorite Kiss records when I was in, I don't know, probably high school, something like that. I mean, it was heavy, It was negative. It was everything that you wanted out of that type of music when you're that age. Now, mind you, again, it's a very different record. As we said earlier, this is a record that a lot of KISS fans either love or hate. A lot of people love it because of how heavy it is and how, negative it is, and how, you got Paul singing about not wanting to be himself, which, as we all know from the biography, might have been a little bit of where he actually was. But we're used to the band doing Shout It Out Loud and All American Man and Let Me Go Rock and Roll and Cold Gin and all these good times, and then you have them talking about all these terrible things. I mean, Childhood's ends about a suicide. That's not something KISS sings about. KISS doesn't sing about suicide. They sing about living forever and following your dreams, but that's what this record was about. And, it started to make a lot more sense when I was kind of in that middle, high school phase where you want a lot of negativity in your life. So I started to try to do some research on the record. Now, back in the day, it was a little bit harder. Nowadays, you can just bring up a YouTube video and learn all about any record you want, or go, in the case of this record, go to kulik.net and read Bruce's, write-up on it. But, back in my day, we had to walk 37 miles in the snow to listen to Carnival Souls. Maybe it wasn't that extreme, but it was a little bit harder to find info, and I really couldn't find much on this thing. So it was kind of an anomaly to me. I just kind of loved the record, and, as the years went by and the internet became, more and more prevalent in my life, and social media did, and you had groups on, at the time, MySpace, and eventually Facebook and everything, and, I eventually learned more about this record, but it continued to be one of my favorite records for quite a long time, and my opinion's changed a little bit in recent years or throughout the years. I mean, it's not my favorite KISS record. I honestly wouldn't even say it's in my top 10, but it's also not in my bottom 5 by any stretch of the imagination. This sits somewhere right in the middle, if you ask me, and that's, my opinion. And again, this isn't a review. That's for a later day where I'll really go into details, but I think it's a strong record that's a misunderstood record. Obviously, the band was trying to sound like whatever was current at the time. One of the biggest influences, I would say, would be Alice in Chains and, honestly, Soundgarden. There's not a lot of, say, Nirvana, because a lot of people say it's the grunge record, but I don't really hear Nirvana on this. I hear more the heavier side, which is good, because the band would have looked foolish trying to write, Smells Like Teen Spirit Part 2. But even with all that being said, it's a very interesting record. If you've never checked it out, you really should do yourself a favor and check it out. I mean, Bruce is very proud of this thing to this day. He even went on to play The Jungle and I Walk Alone, as well as apparently Master and Slave in Union and the Eric Singer Project. And one of the things that also is interesting about this record to me, here 20 years after the release of it, is how much the band themselves ignore it. Gene and Paul basically act like this thing never existed. Now, it's still represented in a lot of the things that they put out that kind of chronicle the whole band. There was a little bit of it represented on the box set, and they did include it in the vinyl reissues they did a couple years back. But, a lot of times this record's compared to The Elder. Not musically, but kind of the reception. Again, people love it or they hate it. It's a drastic departure for the band, things like that. But here's the thing about The Elder. The band do admit and do revive The Elder a little bit more than they do this record, because usually when they do acoustic shows, you're going to get A World Without Heroes. And they've done a few songs on the KISS Cruise and things like that. But the Carnival Souls release here has largely stayed completely ignored and completely forgotten as far as KISS goes. Now, at the time of this recording, the next KISS Cruise for 2017 is about to happen, and Bruce and Bob are some guests on that, and it makes me wonder if somehow they might actually play a song from it on that. I feel that if Bruce does some type of set or clinic, he'll definitely say something about this record or do something from it, but I wonder if somehow he could go on stage with them and do I Walk Alone or Hate or The Jungle or something awesome like that. So that's one thing that's really interesting to me too. Like I said, the band just ignores it. I don't know why. It's a good record in that regard. I mean, I get at the time they wanted to ignore it because they were in the reunion height, and they even kind of represent that on the record, because inside of this thing you have this order pamphlet here that kind of just, has all this KISS stuff you can order. You can get makeup masks and commemorative coins and a MasterCard, or a Visa card actually, or phone cards. Remember that? It was a thing at one time, phone cards. You can get all this junk from the reunion tour, so it pretty much seems like they were pretty much trying to shove the reunion in your face even when this was out, and that's probably again what contributed to what we were talking about earlier with The Jungle being a successful single on radio. Maybe people thought that was the reunited band, and they were like, yeah, man, Peter and Ace got it again. They're putting out heavy music with the band, but I digress. One last thing, though, I do want to talk about is what if this had come out as a regular record? What if the reunion tour would not have happened? What if Bruce and Eric had stayed in the band, Ace and Peter continued to do the Bad Boys of Kiss tour, and eventually, you know, drink themselves into comas or whatever? What would have happened with this release? So Kiss was at a commercial all-time low, and it made sense they did the reunion tour. But what would have happened if this had came out? You know, would it have been a success? Would The Jungle have been a huge success on radio like it was? Would it have been an even bigger success because they would have made a proper video for it? Would the band have went out and toured and played a lot of stuff from this record? Would it have, you know, propelled them into bigger venues, or would they have stayed at kind of the mid-tier places that they were playing at that point? You know, playing to, you know, on a bad night 3,000 people, or on a good night 10 or 12,000. You know, who knows? You know, I don't really want to predict. I mean, it'd have been cool if they'd had like that flaming head thing on stage that was, you know, in a lot of the concept artwork, or maybe the skin unzipping itself or whatever. You know, there was a lot of weird concept art going around, and the stage set could have been cool, and the set list could have been phenomenal because they were firing on all cylinders with that lineup. But I guess we'll never know. We will never know what could have been with Carnival of Souls had it been released in a proper format. So that brings us to the end of this. I mean, I've enjoyed this record with ups and downs on it, but I still like it to this day. It's an interesting piece of KISStory, and if you've never checked it out and you've actually sat through this whole video, I implore you to go check it out because it's a very different side of Kiss. If you like heavy music in particular, you gotta check this out. It's Kiss at their heaviest. They're the closest to a metal band that they ever have been and ever will be. Some people might say that that really belongs more to Creatures of the Night, but I think this thing's heavier. It has some crunch, it has some very heavy parts, and that's really all there is to say for me on this record 20 years after the fact. So, what do you guys think of this record? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Do you sit somewhere in the middle like myself? Let me know in the comments below. Give this video a thumbs up if you somehow sat through the whole thing at this point, and hit that subscribe button to get some more Kiss videos, some more rock and roll videos, some more metal videos, some more nerd videos, and hit the little bell, the little ding ding, so you actually get the updates. Once again, I've been Kimchi Chris. Thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I will see you guys on the next video.